back to the garage for another episode of Garage Theology. Today I'm fixing this old broken stove whilst looking at Psalm 62. We've been going through the Psalms over the last few weeks, and we've looked at how different Psalms help us to speak to God from different situations. So Psalm 22 teaching us how to speak to God in those places of darkness. Psalm 51 teaching us how to speak to God when we feel like we've disappointed him and let him down. And then Psalm 62 helps us to think about how we speak to God in those moments where we feel like the world is uncertain. We're not sure where we're going, we're not sure of our grounding or what is going to come next. That idea of uncertainty, that where we're standing isn't going to last forever, which is a sensible thing to realise, but not necessarily an easy place to be. Which way around did this go? I think that goes in there. So I'm just going to get some strong glue and a clamp, and I might put a brace on it as well. And so Psalm 62, I encourage you to go and read through it. Is this psalm of speaking to not just to self, but also to accusers, to opposition, and then to the people, and finally at the end it speaks to God. I think I'm going to go and get a slightly less over dramatic glue than that one. Slightly better glue. So yeah, so Psalm 62, I'm going to read out a chunk of it. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall never be shaken. And the psalm starts with this statement that what do you do when you're not sure what to do, when you feel like the world is shifting underneath you? Do you go and do you talk to other people? Do you seek comfort in company and solace in other people's understanding? Not a stupid thing to do. We've had a bit of a tricky week here with various things, and it was great to be able to talk to people and share with people. We run a drop-in cafe for families affected by disability. It's great to be able to talk to people and to get their wisdom and their input and their insight. But it's not what the psalmist recommends we start with. You know, in the midst of our troubles this week, I'll admit that my first port of call was sugar-based, chocolate. I know other people in those sorts of times head for alcohol. And all these things seem like tempting solutions when we're in those places of insecurity. They seem to give us comfort where no comfort previously existed. As always, going for beautiful, really, and craftsmanship in my work. Not just as much glue as I can fit in, honest. But the psalmist says that no, don't go for just those sorts of things. The place to start is God. There we go. Pressure. Which I think is really important for us all to remember, that actually the first place that will make a difference to us is God's presence. Let's clean up some of that glue. Or a bit of paper, just what I was looking for. And so that's where he starts. My soul finds rest in God alone. And rest there can be translated as rest and also as silence, which is ironic because you know from the rest of the psalm that he's complaining quite loudly at this point. My soul find rest in God alone. Why? Why will you find rest in God? Because he is my rock. And often when we read a bit of the Bible that talks about rock, we instantly go to Jesus talking in Luke about about the foundations. You know, the person who hears his teaching and acts on it is building a house on a foundation of rock, and he who hears his teaching and ignores it is building a house without foundation. When the storm comes, it falls over. But of course, this psalm is written long before Jesus gives that teaching, so it seems more like the psalm is thinking about the rock in Exodus 17, verse 5 to 7. Where God tells Moses that people are in the wilderness and they're fussing and complaining, and Moses, and they haven't got any water, and Moses, what should I do? So God says, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb, strike the rock and water will come out, and your people can drink. And the staff is the staff of the presence of God, and it's this image of God striking the rock on which he stands, and out of it flows living water. That the rock and my salvation is speaking about this as being the place where life comes. He is my rock, he's my source of life, he is my salvation, he's my rescuer. So, first thing, when we're feeling unsure, we go to the rock, we go to the source of life. Kind of makes sense. And then the psalmist turns to those who are opposing him. How long will you assault a man? Would all of you throw him down? This is imagery of murdering him. This leaning wall, this tottering fence. See, God is a great fortress, but the psalmist sees himself as just a unstable wall. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but with their hearts they curse. Seems like the psalmist might be someone of fairly high standing, and opponents are seeking to do him, to knock him from that position, and they're going to do that by telling lies, by undermining him, by dishonouring him. But the psalmist recognises that they can't do anything serious to him. And why? Because he alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honour depend on God. Not on himself, not on his own strength or his own power, but they depend on God alone. He's in a high position because God has put him there. He's in a safe place because God is a safe place. And so the attacks that he's facing aren't worth it. I'm going to cut this off and we'll hit back with what's going on next. Okay. So the psalmist is trusting in God, trusting that he is his safety, his high point, that his honour comes from him, so it doesn't matter about the lies that other people are spreading. And verse 7 then is the sort of at the heart of the psalm. As the psalmist declares in the Hebrew, that with God at the beginning and God at the end of the psalm, the imagery is of God being the most vital aspect of ministry. What do we think? Glue and clamp or drill through and screw? See, glue and clamp, I might well split this little bit of plywood. It's narrow screws, but not... then we'll go with glue. I don't think I've got a small enough drill bit not to destroy that. And I have got an appropriate clamp. With that clamp on, let's test it before we try it. Yeah. Let's do that. So verse 7 is the centre point where it begins and ends in the Hebrew with the word God. God is the source of my salvation and my honour depend on... I can't work it out. What from the NIV? Now, let's look at it in a different translation. I think the ESV has it. Stunning work, as always, with a preparedness. See so many that recommend Bible Gateway if you never look up bits of the Bible. Psalm 62. God rests my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock, my refuge is God. So there we go. That's how you render it in English. With God at the beginning and the end. Look at the ESV. I'll trust in Him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart to Him, for God is our refuge. And I found this bit of the psalm quite interesting. I was reading this week Tim Keller's book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. Joyful book. But no, it's a good book in terms of understanding what's going on in suffering, and if you're not... It's not entirely the most pastoral book, but it's got stuff in there as well if you're in the midst of pain and suffering. It's not just a theoretical book. And so I was reading that this week while I sat waiting for my son at a brownies, like a scouts type thing for younger kids. Brownies? Did I say brownies? Beavers. Negative dad points there. I was waiting for him at Beavers. And I was reading this thing, and Tim Keller argues that that we will have peace to the extent to which that we trust that God answers our prayers as we would answer them if we know what He knows, or if we knew what He knows. And I found that's almost a challenge. I'm not sure whether I entirely agree with it or struggle with it for some reason, whether our peace is that sort of linearly defined by our cognitive assent to the doctrine of God's trustworthiness. But it's a good challenge. Do we really trust God? Because the psalmist here is saying, you've got to pour your will into something. You're going to pour your will and your life, because its heart is will in Hebrew thinking. You're going to pour your will and your life into God, who is our refuge. And it seems that the psalm presents the opponents as they put their will and their heart and their souls into gaining possessions and gaining status. They want to bring the psalmist down to elevate themselves up. To buy some more sandpaper. And the psalmist is saying, no, trust in God. And I think we all know it. So we know some people who trust in family. They put all of their will and their effort into family. See the family as a refuge. And some people put all their will and their effort into possessions. Strive. I used to work in a work field where the job adverts were always described must be money motivated. Always struggled with that job. And so I think we can all understand the idea that we would put our will and our trust into something. And the psalmist is saying the only place you can do that to have any meaningful payback is to put your will and your trust into God. To trust that He is the right person. And His justification for that is beautifully simple. Were you ever told at Bible college that a sermon should have just one point? You should just make sure everything you say goes to that one point. But this psalm breaks that rule. It has 2 teaching points. And the 2 teaching points are wonderfully simple. Leaving you waiting. His 2 teaching points are this. At the end of the psalm, verse 11. One thing God has spoken, 2 things have I heard, that you, O God, are strong, and that you, O Lord, are loving. unremitting power and unfailing love. That's who God is. The idea that in the midst of the sort of uncertainties of life, we only need to know two things about God. His all unfailing power, all-consuming power, and his unfailing, unremitting love. And the knowledge that God's power is used to demonstrate his love, and his love is shown with power. He doesn't use his power in the way that humans tend to do for self-aggrandizement. The most perfect demonstration of God's power is Christ on the cross, suffering for our sins, making it possible for us to have this relationship with God where we're welcomed into his fortress, into that safe place, where we can be with him for that eternal life, because his love for us is powerful and unfailing. And so this psalm teaches us that when we feel like the world is shaken, that we don't know what we're doing, that we need to start with God. Not with chatting with friends, not with chocolate, not with alcohol, but with prayer. That we need to recognise that nothing can separate us from the love of God. You know, this psalm's there thousands of years probably before Paul's saying it to the Romans. We need to trust that in God we're safe. That although the world may buzz around us, although the worst may happen to us, nothing is going to shake us from God's presence. And finally, we just need to remember, through the midst of all, through the craziness, through the anguish and the pain that may be on the way, that God is powerful and God is loving. And that if we trust him in those two things, we won't go far wrong. Amen. Well, so my question for you, my question at the end of this to, comment underneath is, what do you think it means to trust God? Do you think that trusting God to answer our prayers in the way that we would answer them if we knew what he knows equals the amount of peace we have? Do you think that statement from Keller's right? Comment underneath. I'll try and join in and we'll see whether or not we think that peace and faith in that doctrine can be proportional. I don't know. Let's find out. See you next time. Bye-bye.